All right, Chapter 16, How Populations Evolve. In this chapter, we're going to cover Section 2, Natural Selection. Natural selection is the adaptation of a population to the biotic and abiotic environment. This is going to require variation, meaning that the members of a population differ from one another. It's also going to require inheritance, meaning that those differences are heritable genetic differences. We also are going to need differential adaptiveness, meaning that some differences affect survivability, and differential reproduction. Some differences affect not just survivability, but the likelihood of successful reproduction. Natural selection is going to favor the variant that is most adaptive to the present environmental conditions, which is going to result in a change in allele frequencies in the gene pool and improved fitness of the population. So this is going to be a major cause of microevolution. So there are going to be three types of natural selection that are going to occur depending on what the environment is calling for. These are going to be stabilizing selection, directional selection, and disruptive selection, and we'll go through each one of those. Stabilizing selection is going to look like where the intermediate phenotype is going to be the most adaptive, or the intermediate phenotype is going to be favored. So, for example, the peak is going to narrow. If what we see across the population is a huge range in genetic variation, we're going to find that the most common variations are going to be the most desirable, and over time we're going to start to see a narrowing of that. So the peak of the curve is going to increase and the tails are going to decrease. A great example of this is birth weight. So this is our stabilizing selection. What we find is as the birth weight goes down, the percent of infant mortality goes up. And as the birth weight goes too far up or too far beyond the mean, we also see the percent of infant mortality go up as well. So what we see is the vast majority of births are going to fall within a very narrow range, between about 2.5 to about 3.5 kilograms is going to be our average birth weight. And most births are going to fall within that category. Much lower than that, and we'll see infant mortality rate go up. Much higher than that, and we'll see infant mortality rate go up. So what we're going to find is over the course of time, we're going to see a narrowing of that range. Most birth weights are going to fall within a narrow range. Now, directional selection is going to be a little bit different. Directional selection says that one extreme phenotype is better than the median phenotype, is better than the other extreme as well. So what we're going to see over time, the peak is not going to narrow, but it is going to shift. A great example of this would be giraffes. Remember when we talked about Lamarck and Darwin's theories about evolution using giraffes? Well, in that case, if there was a huge genetic population and we had medium neck giraffes and long neck giraffes and short neck giraffes, well, short necks are not going to be the favored. Even medium necks are not going to be the favored. What we want are the freaks. We want the weirdos out there who have the crazy long necks. The crazier, the longer the neck, the more likely they are going to be fit to survive. And so we're going to see that over time, there's going to be a shifting towards the crazy long necks. So the curve is going to shift in one direction. Another example of this would be bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics. If this is our range of bacteria and some over here have a phenotype that allows them to be, or a genotype that allows them to be resistant to antibiotics, we're going to see that within just a few short decades, the entire population is going to shift in that direction towards favoring the genotype that can survive those antibiotics. Body size increase in horse evolution, very similar to what we talked about with giraffes, that the larger the body size, the more favored it was. And so we've seen over the course of time, from the Hyracotherium to the Merychippus to the Equus, our current modern breed of horse, we're going to see an increase or a shift towards a larger horse size. Disruptive selection is going to be just that. It's going to be disruptive. In this case, two or more extreme phenotypes are favored over the intermediate phenotype. In this case, what started off as an original phenotypic range is going to spread into two peaks. Great example of this would be British land snails. British land snails vary because of their wide geographic range causes selection to vary as well. So in the low vegetation areas in forests, thrushes are going to feed on the light banded snails in the forested areas, so the dark band is going to be favored. So let's say that in our original range is everything from really, really light to really, really dark snail banding pattern. We're going to find that in the forest where there's lots of vegetation, the dark phenotype is going to be favored because they'll be able to hide better. However, in the low vegetation, in low vegetation areas, the thrush feed on the dark banded snails, so the light banded snails thrive. So depending on that particular environment, we could see what was once sort of an average where we had light, medium, dark. We're going to see that in certain areas the dark is going to be favored, in other areas the light is going to be favored, and we're really not going to find too many of a medium color because they can't hide anywhere. There's nowhere they can hide. They can't hide on the beach, and they can't hide in the forest. So we're going to start to see significant differences in those banding patterns based on the particular environment. Another very important aspect of natural selection is sexual selection. Sexual selection is adaptive changes to males and females that lead to an increased ability to secure a mate. So with the males, there's an increased ability to compete with other males for a mate. With females, they tend to become more choosy. They choose to select the male with the best fitness or the ability to produce surviving offspring. So sexual selection also plays a very important role in this, in determining which characteristics are going to be most favored. So female choice, we're going to talk just a little bit about that. Choice of a mate is a very serious consideration because females tend to produce few eggs, at least in comparison to the number of sperm that males produce. So there's a couple of hypotheses that hypothesize how females go about coming up with their choice. So there's the good gene hypothesis, the idea that females choose mates based on the basis of traits that improve the chance of survival. There's also the runway hypothesis, the idea that females choose mates on the basis of traits that improve the male's appearance. We're going to see sort of the good genes hypothesis. We're going to see that a lot more in areas where survival is difficult. In areas of high predation or harsh conditions like frozen tundra, we're going to see that females are going to be choosing mates that are strong, that have, maybe good muscle mass, have thick fur coats, have characteristics that will compete for survival. The runway hypothesis, we're going to see this a lot more in areas like tropical rainforests, where resources are abundant and life is theoretically kind of easy, in the sense that there's an abundance of resources, there's abundance of food, and a relatively low predation rate. In those cases, we're going to see females choose on the basis of traits that improve male appearance. This is why in the tropical rainforest, we're going to see so many bright colors and ridiculous mating dances and unusual mating calls and rituals, is because we're looking for females that are going to choose on a basis of appearance. Another thing that we want to point out is sexual dimorphism. This is where males and females are going to differ in size and other traits. Female choice can explain why male birds tend to be more ornate than females. Females don't have to be beautiful. They get to sit back and be picky because they're the ones who have the limited number of eggs, so their choice ultimately determines who gets to reproduce or not. And a lot of times females tend to be drab in color because it is going to be their responsibility to sit on the nest or care for the young. Males, on the other hand, have to be chosen, so we tend to see more ornate or ornamentation in male birds. Remarkable plumes of males may also signify health and vigor. Brighter colors might mean better access to more diverse diet, or just an overall stronger, better diet, more enriched nutrient diet as well. So dimorphism, that's where the drab females tend to choose flamboyant males as mates. Male competition can also play a role in natural selection. Males can father many offspring because they continually produce sperm in large quantities. So they tend to compete to inseminate as many females as possible. There tends to be a cost-benefit analysis that needs to go along with this. Is access to mating worth the competition? A lot of times that competition is going to involve fighting for and protecting like a harem often, where this is going to involve a lot of aggressive behavior. It's going to involve fighting. It's going to involve competing for territories and food sources and mating opportunities. There's a lot of energy that has to go into maintaining this. So that can also play a role in natural selection. So here, this is just a diagram showing competition between red male deer who have to fight for territory. They fight for food resources, and they fight for mating opportunities. That's it for this chapter. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. I would say for this chapter, focus most specifically on the different types of natural selection. You should be able to draw a diagram. If I were to present you with a scenario, like say we suddenly have a change in a population where we used to have really bright colored peppered moths. Now we suddenly have really dark colored peppered moths due to the abundance of pollution in the atmosphere. You should be able to tell me, is that a stabilizing, directional, or disruptive selection? And you should be able to draw a diagram of that. So that would be the kind of question that may show up on a test or homework assignment. You should be able to identify the different types of natural selection in a scenario, and then also know what that diagram looks like. All right, please let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.